She thought she was being sold to a monster. She was wrong about everything except the danger. The train ticket in Clara Whitmore's gloved hand was damp with sweat by the time the whistle screamed into the Missouri dusk. Behind her lay a grave she'd dug with her own hands that spring, her father's, the reverend who had buried half the county before the fever took him too. Ahead lay a name she'd never heard spoken aloud, a photograph of a stranger, and a promise written in a newspaper column meant for desperate women and desperate men. Honest rancher, 30 years of age, seeks a God-fearing wife for life in the Arizona Territory. Clara had read those words 100 times on the 6-day journey west, as if repetition could turn ink into a face she could trust. She did not know yet that the man waiting for her at the end of that line had killed 11 men, and that every one of them had deserved it. When the train finally shuddered to a stop at the edge of nowhere, a town called Piedra Seca that existed mostly because a river had once run through it and stopped bothering to, Clara stepped down into heat that struck her like a slap. Red rocks stretched in every direction, broken by cactus and silence. She scanned the platform for a man in a wide-brimmed hat, fair and gentle-eyed, the way she'd pictured him on sleepless nights. Instead, the sheriff approached her, turning his hat over in his hands like a man about to deliver bad news at a funeral. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "there's someone waiting on you outside town. Goes by Diego Reyes. Some folks call him El Lobo." "The wolf." Clara's mouth went dry. "That's not the name I was written to." "No, ma'am," the sheriff admitted. "It ain't." A wagon was waiting past the last building, driven by a boy who wouldn't meet her eyes and wouldn't say a word beyond, "He is waiting," in accented English. They rode 2 hours into country that stopped looking like anything a church-going woman from Missouri had ever seen. Canyons the color of dried blood, silence so total she could hear her own heartbeat, and finally smoke rising from a cluster of adobe buildings tucked against a cliff wall like they were hiding from God himself. That was where she saw him for the first time. Diego Reyes stood at the center of a ring of vaqueros and gunmen, a scar cutting white through the dark stubble on his jaw, a pistol worn low and loose like it had grown out of his hip. He wore no hat either, black hair pushed back, eyes the color of a storm that hadn't decided yet whether it would pass over or tear the roof off the world. He didn't smile. He looked at her the way a man looks at a debt he didn't ask for and can't refuse to pay. "You are Clara Whitmore," he said. Not a question. His English carried the rasp of the border. Careful, deliberate, like every word cost him something. "I was told I would marry a rancher," she said, and hated how her voice shook. "You will marry a rancher," he said. "You will also marry a man 3 counties are hunting to hang." The world tilted under her boots. She understood then that the letter had been a lie, or at least half of one. Diego explained it plainly, without apology, the way a man explains a fact of weather. He had cattle, land, water rights that 3 different powerful men wanted him dead for. A white bride, respectable, God-fearing, a preacher's daughter no less, would slow the noose the territorial court was tightening around his name. It was not romance, it was armor. "I did not lie about the ranch," he said. "I lied about the safety of it. I am sorry for that." "You're sorry," Clara repeated, and something hot rose in her chest that wasn't quite fear anymore. "You dragged me 1,000 miles under false promises so men wouldn't shoot you." "See," he said simply, "and to keep the people who work this land from starving when they come for me anyway." He looked past her, toward the ring of vaqueros and their families watching from doorways, children peering from behind their mothers' skirts. "You may leave on the next train, and I will pay your passage myself, and no man here will stop you. Or you may stay, and I will protect you with everything I have until the day it is not enough." He held her gaze. "I would not force a wife on any woman. I have had enough of things forced on me." She should have left. Every rule she'd been raised on said she should have left. But there was a tremor under his voice she hadn't expected from a man they called a wolf, something that sounded almost like loneliness, and Clara Whitmore, orphaned, penniless, and out of any other doors to walk through, found she could not make her feet carry her back to that wagon. The wedding, when it came 2 days later, was small and strange, an old priest riding 2 days from the nearest mission, a handful of vaqueros as witness, no flowers, no bells, only dust and heat, and Diego's hand steady around hers as he placed a ring, his mother's, worn thin with age, on her finger. When it was done, he said only, "Gracias," and walked away to check the fences, as if he'd just closed a business deal instead of taken a wife, and something in Clara ached at how easily he could turn from her. That night he did not come near her bed. His blanket lay folded on the floor of the small adobe room, and in the morning she found he'd already been gone 2 hours, out with the herd before the sun cleared the ridge. It was the pattern of the weeks that followed, a man who worked from dark to dark, who spoke to his men with a quiet authority that never needed raising his voice, and who treated his new wife with a careful, distant courtesy that Clara couldn't decide was respect or indifference. It was the old cook, a widow named Refugio, who ran the kitchen like a second sheriff, who told her the truth Diego never would, that his father had been a landowner, shot dead by the very men now trying to take the ranch, that Diego had buried him at 15 and built everything since with his own hands and a very short list of people he trusted. "He does not know how to want something without it being taken from him," Refugio said, kneading dough with hands like leather. "So he does not let himself want anything. Except maybe now." She glanced at Clara. "Now there is you." Clara began to watch him differently after that. She saw how the vaqueros' children ran to him without fear, how he gave his own coat to a shivering ranch hand in a cold snap without a word about it after, how he sat up 3 nights straight with a sick foal because he refused to let anything die on his land that could be saved. He was not the wolf the territory feared. Or he was, but only for the men who came hunting what was his. Those men came on a night with no moon, riders paid by the cattle syndicate that wanted Diego's water rights and had grown tired of waiting for the law to hang him. Clara woke to gunfire and the smell of smoke, to Diego's voice roaring orders through the chaos, to flame climbing the walls of the barn. She grabbed the only weapon in the room, an old shotgun kept behind the door, and ran into a night gone to hell. She found him surrounded, 3 riders closing in, his pistol empty, and his knife the only thing left in his hand. Clara didn't think. She fired into the dark, scattering horses, buying him 1 desperate second. And in that second, Diego moved like the wolf they called him, fast and final. When the shooting stopped, 2 of the hired men were dead in the dirt, and the 3rd was riding for his life back toward the county line, and Diego stood breathing hard in the firelight, staring at his wife with a shotgun still smoking in her hands like he'd never truly seen her before that moment. "You could have died," he said, voice raw. "So could you," Clara answered. "I decided I wasn't ready to be a widow twice in 1 year." Something broke open in his face then, the careful distance he'd kept for weeks, finally cracking. He crossed the space between them and took her face in his hands, rough and scarred and gentle all at once. "I told myself I would not let myself love you," he said. "I did not want to give them one more thing to burn." "Then don't tell yourself anything," Clara whispered. "Just don't let go." He didn't. Not that night, and not in the hard months that followed, when the syndicate's lawyers tried what their gunmen couldn't, and it was Clara, preacher's daughter, who knew how to read a contract and write a letter that shamed a territorial judge into doing his job, who helped save the ranch as much as any man with a rifle did. The town that once whispered El Lobo's name like a curse began, slowly, to say Reyes instead, and to say it with something closer to respect. On the anniversary of that first terrible night at the train station, Diego gave her something wrapped in soft deer hide, a small silver cross, melted down and reshaped from the barrel of the pistol he'd carried the day they met. I do not need it to protect me anymore, he said. I have something better. Clara wears it still, the story goes, on the ranch that still bears the Reyes name in that stretch of Arizona red rock. Proof that a marriage that began as a lie between two desperate people became the truest thing either of them ever built. And if a story like this one, of a scared girl and a hunted man who found in each other the one thing neither expected, land, loyalty, and something that looked a great deal like love, is the kind of tale that keeps you up past midnight wanting just one more chapter, then you already know what to do before the next one lands. Hit subscribe, ring that bell, and stay close, because the desert always has one more story waiting in the dust.